So it is now 1 o'clock. Thank you all for showing up for our live stream. This is our first live stream with JavaScriptLA where we're simultaneously talking to a speaker at the same time and filming from our location. Today we are going to be talking about Raspbian, which is part of the Raspberry Pi. It is an OS for the Raspbian. Today I have guest Nic Raboy, and Nic Raboy is of the Polyglot developer. Um, why don't you actually introduce yourself to our audience, Nic?
Yeah, sure. I'm Nic Raboy, and a little background on me. I'm a developer as well as a, what you can call a developer advocate. So I develop my own applications as well as share knowledge on the whole experience and how to be successful to other developers, spread awareness, things like that. What I plan to do today, actually, so you were partially right, VJ. So we're going to be looking at the Raspberry Pi, and we're going to be looking at one of the preferable operating systems, which is Raspbian. So that's the operating system for the Raspberry Pi. I think you said that we were looking at the operating system for Raspbian, but I'm not sure.
I mean Raspberry Pi. You're correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Great. Yeah, actually. So before we kind of dive into that, though, I just wanted to get some ideas from you. Like, what exactly is Internet of Things? Like, when somebody says that, what are they
Yeah.
talking about?
So I think everyone has their own interpretation of it. They're all similar. So my interpretation of the Internet of Things, or IoT, is like non-typical devices that have access to the internet. They can communicate to the internet or be accessed remotely. So a typical device, in my opinion, would be like a computer. You kind of expect it to be connected to the internet for various reasons, but then a non-typical device might be, say, a light bulb, or some kind of robotic space item, or sensory data collectors, or things like that. Those would be non-typical, maybe probably smaller pieces of hardware that can still be accessed over the internet. Does that make sense, VJ?
Yeah, absolutely. So how do I guess these devices, like how are they so life changing for us? Like what are the things that, people are doing with IoT, in 2019 and then maybe even into the future 2020 and so on?
Yes, I mean, the what you can do with it is kind of limitless. I mean, I know a lot of people are using IoT devices, like I said, for sensors. Um, I'm not 100% positive on the groups, but I'm pretty sure that they're being used to, say, monitor even seismic activity or pollution in the air, or just various things. These IoT devices could be connected to a heart monitor, for all you know.
Um, Very cool. One sec there. I think our audio was a little bit glitchy. Okay, just fixing it.
Sure.
So,
Do you want to reiterate that this is our first one?
yeah, I am. I think people know that on this call that we are, getting this. We're starting to do live streams, so we're gonna experience a little bit of technical difficulty, but stay tuned with us. We'll try to make it so through the live stream. Okay, so cool. Tell us about how somebody could get started on Raspberry Pi.
Yeah,
Like,
so Raspberry Pi is just one outlet when it comes to IoT. A lot of people like Raspberry Pi. A lot of people like Arduino. There's Particle makes, I think, Photon. There's a lot of opportunities when it comes to the IoT space. But I personally like the Raspberry Pi because of how cheap it is, for one, and it uses a familiar operating system, and a set of programming technologies on it. That's why I've kind of adapted to it.
yeah, it's
So you could,
Linux, right? Like essentially, it's a
yeah, I,
smaller
so I
version.
think I think most IoT devices run some flavor of Linux, but a lot of them are very stripped down. Are you familiar with WRT?
Um,
Have
Actually,
you heard of that term before?
I've heard of the term, but I'm not as familiar as
Yeah,
you.
so I think that's like a flavor of Linux for like routers, like Netgear routers. It's super stripped down. It's very particular to the device that it's on. Whereas with the Raspberry Pi and Raspbian, which is what they actually recommend, it's based on Debian, which is a very popular Linux distribution because
Sure.
it's kind of
Yeah.
the foundation to Ubuntu, which is probably one of the most popular Linux distributions.
Right, right, right. Okay. So, do you have like a Raspberry Pi at
Yeah,
your
I've actually got a lot. So
Okay,
I'll show it on the camera, see if it shows up. So I actually have it in a case here. It's plugged into the computer. This is
sweet.
a full-size Raspberry Pi 3. As you can probably see on the screen that we're
Hmm.
on Raspberry Pi 4 now. I have quite a few of these 3 devices. I also have, this is a Raspberry Pi Zero right here hooked up to a GPS module.
Very
So
cool.
this is even smaller than the one, the Raspberry Pi 3. So I actually have quite a few. I'm a collector.
And what are you doing with all those different devices there? Like,
Yeah, inside my home, I have one of them hooked up for my own synchronization server, kind of like Dropbox. I have one for that I use with a bunch of hard drives for object storage. I have one hooked up to a TV in my house for retro gaming.
oh.
I Yeah, I'm an addict when it comes to these things.
Well, they're so cheap, right? Like, so
They are. The Zero, if you want the one without Wi-Fi, it's $5. I mean, that's affordable to most people in most places.
Oh, that is very affordable. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So, how do you get started with the Pi? Like, what are some things that you should do, like, to basically get started?
So actually, to get started, you don't even need a physical device if you want to just play around with the experience. So if I'm on the Raspberry Pi main website, you can actually go to the download section, and you have the opportunity to download, first of all, Raspbian for the Pi itself, or Raspbian for your desktop. And the reason why you would get Raspbian for your desktop is for a virtual machine. You get to
Oh, that's
install
cool.
it to VirtualBox or VMware or Parallels, and kind of get that full experience that you would on the Pi itself, which is good for development, maybe even prototyping, before it even ends up on that device.
Sure, sure, sure. Um,
And of course, there are other operating systems as well that you can use, but Raspbian is probably the most popular.
Raspbian's the most lightweight, if you will, right? Like it's you know, built.
I think there's probably more lightweight ones than that, but
You
I
even
think
have Windows 10 right there. Windows 10 IoT Core.
yeah, and it's not the full featured Windows. It's their IoT version, which I honestly haven't played around with, so I don't know too much on it.
Okay.
But I mean, you've got things like Libra ELEC, which is like Kodi, like used to turn it into a streaming device, like for Plex and things like that.
Right, right. Okay, we can get into some of that a little bit later to the towards the talk.
Sure.
Maybe you could show us like a virtual machine if you have one installed, and maybe
Yeah,
some
so
cool
I
commands.
didn't install it yet. I was going to go through the process. I actually downloaded the Raspbian desktop image. I am using Parallels because I'm on a Mac and that's my preferred. You could get VMware. You could even use the free open source
VirtualBox,
VirtualBox.
yeah.
But for me, all I would do is I would say new. I would select it. I'll select from an image that I downloaded. Chances are it found it already, and it did on my computer. This is on my desktop.
Very
I would
cool.
say continue. I would just go through the process. I can customize it. I'd say create, and it spins up pretty much the same experience that you would get on the actual device.
Okay.
And I would say, and I don't have to install it. I could actually run it in live mode, which would be kind of like a live boot CD. Have you ever experienced that, VJ?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you stick it in, you kind of get the full graphical experience, but it's not truly installed. It's not persisted to
Right,
disk or anything like that.
right. It's local to the USB.
Yeah. So this is the experience that you kind of get, and this is pretty close to what you would experience if you were to install it on the Raspberry Pi, because the Raspberry Pi does have either a full-size HDMI cable or port or a micro, so you have the opportunity to hook it to your TV and use it like a full-on monitor or whatever has HDMI support.
That's cool. Now, I have a question for you on that though. I once tried to, install Raspberry Pi on, or Raspbian on a Raspberry Pi and then output it to a TV. I
Yeah,
was not able to get the HDMI port to work though. Was that because I
really.
just needed to like install a driver? Yeah.
So one thing that could cause that issue maybe, and I don't, your issue could be totally different.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there are different versions of Raspbian. So this, again, this is the desktop version for the virtual machines, but there's also Raspbian Lite and
Mm-hmm.
Raspbian, I guess you could say desktop for the Raspberry Pi, where Lite doesn't have all of the UI components installed. It's more for headless operation and things like that
I see. I see.
to access through a terminal.
Okay. Well, very cool. Yeah. So.
But yeah, so inside of Raspbian, you have access to the terminal, things that you would expect in a Linux environment. It's already preloaded with some programming technologies because the whole goal behind Raspberry Pi Foundation is they want to get the younger crowd interested in programming. They really push Python on it, things like that. But it's also a great introduction into Linux as well, would be different from Windows and Mac, right?
Right. Right. And what would be some of the apps, that, young people could check out if they wanted to get into Linux? Actually, hold that thought because it's not just young people, maybe
Yeah.
people like myself too, like what are some
Yeah,
things?
I've got a ton of Raspberry Pi, and I'm old. So
Yeah. I feel like, I mean, like I've done work on Linux boxes. I mean, I've
yeah,
configured like a server on Amazon, web server, and like installed
yeah,
PHP and stuff like. But I sometimes feel like I still need a pretty good brush up. So I mean,
yeah,
anything you might recommend on there, that would be kind of cool.
yeah. I mean, people are programming all kinds of stuff. It's got the same kind of support that you would see in a computer.
Mm-hmm.
It can handle graphics to an extent. Of course, it's a low power computer,
Right.
but whatever you can think of. I know that a lot of people are building lightweight games with it. Um, it's whatever your imagination can bring you, and then as well as because, and I'll take the top off of this one that I have on my desk, and I'll show it on the camera. I don't know if it might be a little hard to see,
Oh,
but
nice.
do you see the pins
Yeah.
right there?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the GPIO header, and that's where you start adding things to it, like sensors, motors, anything that you want to interface directly with the Raspberry Pi.
Very nice.
Like just like I have in my Raspberry Pi Zero, I've got the headers and I've hooked it up to a GPS module, and it's not specific to the Raspberry Pi. It's just a random GPS module that I've got hooked up to it, so I can actually collect latitude and longitude data, for example.
Ah, very nice. Okay, you have to talk about that a little bit more. Let's go
Yeah,
through the basics of using
yeah.
Raspbian. Maybe walk us through.
Yeah, so typically, at least when I'm using it, what you probably want to do is start the package manager and like, update everything because you never know how old your image is. And you can do that through the UI, or you can, hold on one second. I hear a lot of echo, VJ.
Yeah, I'm working on it. Remember, this is live, people, so we're
Yeah.
yeah. Uh,
For anyone else who doesn't hear the echo, it's so loud that it goes to the center of my mind as soon as I hear it.
okay. Is that a little bit
Yeah.
better?
Oh yeah, it's a lot better.
Okay, great. All
Yeah.
right.
But yeah, no, I would boot up a terminal and I would say something like sudo apt get and then I would update.
Right.
We'll see if it lets you update it in the live because I didn't actually install it. I'm using live CD, so it won't persist. It'll just terminate when I close this. But I would do a sudo apt get update, and this is part of the whole Linux experience.
Right.
And then I would say something like sudo apt get upgrade, and I would upgrade all of my packages after that, which I won't let it do right now because there's quite a few, right?
Um, so I have a question for you on that, right? Like,
Yeah,
sometimes I feel like when people try out a Raspberry Pi and, when they first jump in, well, not even just Raspberry, when they try Linux, when they jump into Linux, there's a lot of like command line stuff that they have to do first before, they can really use
yeah.
their computer. So like maybe for people who don't understand what you're doing there, like what does a sudo apt update and an upgrade mean?
Yeah, so the update pulls all of the package information, so all of the software information that's currently installed on the Raspberry Pi. It pulls the updated information about it. It doesn't actually pull the updated packages. It just gives you information so that way, hey, it's like an RSS feed kind of. Like it tells you that something new exists. And then when you do an upgrade, you can look at all of that new information and decide if you want to do it actually update to the latest versions based on that information. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So do you recommend like updating, your Linux boxes quite often, or can we just kind of
Yes.
run them?
So I mean, you don't have to,
Hmm.
but when you first start up your Raspberry Pi and you get it going with Raspbian, the package manager it gives you new firmwares too for your hardware. So it's always kind of nice to get the latest firmware in case they fix something with the hardware itself on the Raspberry Pi.
Right. And because Linux is open source, you have to kind of do these things because if you don't, right, like it's not like Windows or Apple where they'll handle a lot of the updates for you automatically. If you want your Linux to be stable, you kind of have to do this yourself, right?
Yeah, oh, it's the same concept. I believe you can set up automatic updates just like you would in Windows and Mac. It's just by default it doesn't have automatic updates.
I see. Okay. Yeah, let's keep going.
So yeah, so one thing to note though, and I actually found this it made sense to me, but I found this out kind of the hard way, I guess. So even though I'm using this virtual machine, I'm running Raspbian, the experience is almost identical, and you could fool anyone else that you're actually running a Raspberry Pi right here. You have to remember that it's not the same architecture, the same CPU architecture.
Sure. Sure.
So I mean, when you're using this virtual machine, if I had to guess, this is like a 64-bit image that I've installed in Parallels. Whereas on the Raspberry Pi itself, you're working with ARM, right?
Right.
So the differences in that come down to the package manager level, I guess. So if you try to install a package with this package manager, it will more than likely find it because Debian support for standard architectures for computers is very extensive.
Mm-hmm.
But if you try to do that same package on your Raspberry Pi, it might not exist because there may not be ARM support for that package. So it could be a little deceiving when you use the virtual machine versus the real deal. It's something that you do have to be a little concerned with. But that after you reach that point, you're probably doing more aggressive things on this Linux installation than the bare minimum that most people might experience, which would be uh, learning Linux, getting started with Python, things like that.
Right. Right. Okay. Um,
Like I actually tried to install some Python packages, and they didn't exist for ARM. So it left me wondering what the heck was going on, because I figured, hey, isn't this the same thing? But then I really thought about it, and I'm like, you know what, the architecture might be a little different.
that makes sense. By the way, we have some people just kind of like messaging us on the chat,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and they're just saying that the audio and the video are very good, and so that's a great relief, honestly. We were
yeah.
so
That is
worried
good.
about this live stream, so
We
uh,
had some issues during our test.
yeah. Uh, so that's good. I'm glad that things are okay. Feel free if you're listening
Yeah,
in to just write messages to us. Do them in the YouTube chat because I'm
yeah.
actually on Discord filming this, and so I won't see the Discord messages as easily as I'll see the YouTube messages. So feel free to message there, especially if you have
So
questions.
excellent. So one thing I wanted to point out. So I do have my Raspberry Pi plugged in. I don't know if you can see the little light in. See, there it is. There's a
Yeah,
light.
yeah.
So it's plugged into my computer. So what I also figured out recently, and I'm surprised didn't figure it out sooner because it would have helped a significant amount. So I just exited out the virtual machine. I got rid of Focus. If you're using a Mac, you can actually go to connect to server, and you can actually use
Oh,
VNC with your
wow.
Raspberry Pi. So I
Hmm.
didn't know that Mac had VNC built in. So
I
if I wanted to, I could use the host name of my Raspberry Pi. because it's on the same network as my computer, I could use the host name, which is Raspberry Pi by default, and say connect.
That's cool.
And of course,
Um,
it fails during the demo, right?
that's okay. Well,
Let me try it one more time.
sure. And for those of you tuning in, just real quick, Nick is going to be here in LA and Orange County giving a meetup. That's kind of why we're doing a live stream today. We're just,
Hold
for
on.
those people who are unfamiliar with Nick, we just wanted to, do something fun. Just have him come and check out, hang out with us on the internet and introduce himself. He was here last year, and he had a really good turnout. He's done quite a different a lot of topics. I think you were doing stuff with CouchDB, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
so I did some stuff. So I did some API development with Couchbase, and then I also did some serverless as well.
yeah. So Nick is very very cool. He's got a lot of experience in this space. And again, if you want to check him out at the Polyglot Developer. We'll bring links at the end. So go on.
So what I'm actually doing here is I turned on the terminal. I'm going to try to connect with SSH because you can actually SSH directly into the Pi. If you're comfortable with that, just going to type in the default.
That's
What I'm going to
nice.
do is I'm going to restart the VNC server. See if that's maybe the problem, and try it again because I really wanted to show the VNC because I thought it was pretty cool.
So this means like you could leave this at home and then, maybe
Yeah,
connect via your Mac. Like in theory, right? Like you could connect to this box, from anywhere in the world and then
yeah.
yeah, like just like you would with an Amazon server, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's so on one of my Raspberry Pis, like I said, I have it as a sync server. I'm using a software called Resilio, and I have no affiliation with them, but Resilio is based off of the BitTorrent protocol. So it gives you peer-to-peer sync, which I think is pretty cool. I have it installed on my Raspberry Pi so I can synchronize data between my Pi and my various computers. It works out pretty well.
That's really cool. Okay.
So I just rebooted my Pi just in case it was spazzing out,
Mm,
and I'll start the VNC server again. See if we get lucky this time.
all right.
That is so odd. Let me uh, let me check out the IP address.
Well, we can always come back to this particular, because I know you're just demoing different things. So, like, I don't want
Yeah,
you to get too stuck on it. We can,
I'll
you know,
I'll just try this last one,
all
and then
right,
we'll see what happens.
persistence.
You know what? Oh, there it is.
Oh,
I think I know what the problem was,
what was the
and
problem?
I'll log in.
Okay.
So I'm thinking that maybe my virtual machine here,
Mm-hmm.
since they might have the same host name. It might be getting confused on my network.
Ah, that makes
Um,
sense. But there you go.
so
You just remote logged in.
yeah, so this is the actual Raspberry Pi versus the
Virtual machine.
yeah, the virtual machine. So you can see the experience is pretty much identical. It'll probably be a little slower because it's less powerful than my virtual machine is.
Mm-hmm.
But this is where you can actually do anything. And for example, if I wanted to, I could say something like, and this is a setup step that you would do after you start your Raspberry Pi for the first time, but you would say sudo raspi config,
Mm-hmm.
where you actually have access to configure it. So you can configure things like the interfacing options. So do you want to enable the camera module if you have one, so the port on the actual device? Do you want SSH to be turned off? VNC? You have access to the serial port, so the GPIO headers that I mentioned, you can actually connect over serial with it if you say have no Wi-Fi at all. So
Sure.
there's a lot of very cool things that you can do. You can even overclock it if you wanted to.
That's really cool. Um,
Uh,
what do you recommend, like for a hobbyist? Like maybe, some
as far as the
things.
configuration,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So when I always boot it up the first time, I always go into my network options. I always change the host name. because for one, I'm always paranoid that everyone knows that the Raspberry Pi by default is Raspberry Pi as the host name. And you saw that I was able to connect to the host name, or I should have been able to connect to the host name. So if somebody was on your network, at least make it difficult for them, change it up, maybe
Yeah.
make it more identifiable to yourself. I always write the host name on the back of mine.
Hyrule.
so so that way I know what it's supposed to be.
Very cool.
This one, of course, I just wiped out, so it's back to the default.
Okay.
But I always change the host name. I also go into advanced options. I expand the file system because it if you use a very large micro SD card on it, it doesn't take up the full file system by default. I think it takes up like 8 GB. So if you want to leverage the full file system, just expand it. It's just a one click. You don't have to do any kind of fancy configurations. Just click it and it's done.
Very nice.
On my lower end, the Raspberry Pi Zero, because it's a lot less powerful than the Raspberry Pi 3, and because I always use it in headless mode without a monitor,
Mm-hmm.
I always change the memory settings. So 64 megabytes of video memory is probably overkill. I always drop it down to like 16 or 8
So
because
quick question for you here. How much memory
yeah.
does the Raspberry Pi come with?
Yeah, so the Raspberry Pi 3, I believe, has 1 GB of RAM
Okay.
and a quad core ARM processor.
Oh, wow. Okay. This is
Yeah, the
serious
Raspberry Pi
business.
4 though is intense. So you can get up to 4 GB of RAM, and it's a significantly better process. The Raspberry Pi 4 is probably a lot better than a lot of laptops, if you can
Wow.
believe it. Yeah,
Wow. I'm really excited by this because I mean like this is just amazing technology when I think
yeah.
about it.
But I
So,
mean, this Raspberry Pi Zero though,
mm.
I mean, we're looking at I think it has 512 RAM and one core processor, so it's a lot reduced in comparison.
For like the smaller projects, right? Okay.
Yeah. So some of the lightweight ones that don't. I mean, this big one's cool and all, but do you really need that? I mean, maybe you want a little one. I mean, this is like the size of a pack of gum. Uh, so I mean, the utility might be better for you.
So could you theoretically like, buy a whole bunch of these and then make like your own like rack of like,
Yeah,
cloud
plenty of
drive?
people do that.
Plenty of people do that. So like you have your own private like cloud
Yeah.
network. Oh wow.
So from what I understand, so there's a site that's affiliated with the Raspberry Pi Foundation. They run their whole organization off of a cluster of Raspberry Pis. Yeah. And
That's
then a lot of
super
people
cool.
use the Raspberry Pi for machine learning type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So they have clusters of them that are just cranking out processing power
Very cool.
because they run off of a USB micro port. They take up very little energy.
Very, very cool. Very cool. Okay. So let's keep going through, more of the desktop. What else would you like to us to know about Raspberry Pi? Um,
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the basics. I mean, my goal was just to show you how easy it was to
mhm.
just interact with the Raspberry Pi from a visual perspective.
What about like
Uh,
from web development? Like let's say
yeah,
you're a JavaScript developer, right? You're working with, you're talking to JavaScriptLA. How can somebody, set up maybe like a simple server? You don't have to like
yeah,
walk us through all the details, but maybe just like a
yeah. So
high
I would
level.
say sudo apt-get Node.js, I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, actually, install.
Install, right?
See if it works.
Looks like it's doing it. There you go.
Yep, there you go. So we're getting Node.js the same way, almost the same way that anyone else would, except for on Mac and what you're using Homebrew now and Chocolatey on Windows, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So similar concept, but once it's installed, you use it like you normally would. You have the full access of npm. You could say Node to serve your applications. You could do whatever you want, whatever you would normally do.
And what do you recommend, like, as far as like maybe like I wanted to run, like a website on this server, right? So like,
Yeah,
I configure maybe my Node.js or maybe like I use something like Nginx or Apache.
yeah. You
Uh,
can even use Docker if you wanted to.
okay, yeah, like
Yeah.
maybe. So how exactly could you do something like that? Like, what would you need to do? Like, what are some other steps, if you wanted to install like maybe Docker or and Apache and all that?
Yeah, so I mean, same thing. I would say npm, not npm, sudo apt get install nginx. It would be installed like any other. So nginx is it's a reverse proxy, right?
That's right.
So you would install it nginx when you're serving your application with Node. You'd probably be serving it on, at least a
Local.
lot of people use 3000, right? Is
Right.
the port.
Right.
So you would just configure nginx to reroute traffic from whatever nginx is looking at, maybe port 80 and some kind of domain name, to port 3000 locally.
This is cool. Okay, and then yeah, this could be like a full
Yeah.
hobby project. Like one day, like just sit
Yeah,
there and
and if you're using the 3 or earlier like I am, it's probably not a good idea to have a production website running on it because it's not the most powerful. But the four does change the game a little bit. It just came out.
wow. Okay. All right. Let's go on to the second half, I guess, of this. So before we jump into the second half, like I just wanted to ask, does anybody have any questions so far? What they've been seeing? Questions for Nick? Because this is a live stream, you get that chance to kind of ask questions. I see 14, 15 people watching, so
Cool.
that's pretty cool. And they have been pretty much with us since the beginning. So that's always a good thing. Actually, we have 2 thumbs up as well. So I remember when we were testing, like I kept getting thumbs down because of all the audio quality we had. But
Yeah.
uh, nice. So yeah, definitely people are sticking around. That's good. So yeah,
Yeah,
if you have
and in
questions.
addition to, just real quick, in addition, I mean, so I have another one I just pulled out of the drawer. This is another Raspberry Pi Zero. Not only from a software perspective, though, it's also allowed me to practice soldering. So on a $5 thing, $5 piece of hardware, if I mess up, I mess up, I lose $5, right?
Sure.
So it also gave me that kind of new skill because for example, I soldered a USB head onto this, so that way I can just pop it in, no cable. So if you're looking to learn how to solder, it is a good opportunity as well,
That's
not
a
just from a software.
That's actually a good segue. But I have a question, 2 questions.
Yeah.
So one from Stephen Dahl. He asks, "What GPS device did you use with the Pi?"
So I'm using a what is it? A Neo. I'll read it off of here. It's a U-Blox Neo 6M, and it's this one you can get it for like 10 or $20 from Amazon. So it's fairly inexpensive.
Um, okay, so then we also have P. Zaluka. He asks, "How would you connect the GPS device and then get data from it?"
Yeah, so and I'll use this as an example. So I do have my header right here. I actually soldered this one directly myself. This is a female header. Generally, they don't come with any. You have to solder one, as at least for the Raspberry Pi Zero. For the Raspberry Pi standard size, they come with headers, the male size, male type. But you can just get jumper wires. These are not soldered in. These are just standard wires that pop out. I don't know if that's visible on the camera at all, but they just pop in. The pins on the actual device. There's a template, so each pin does do something different. You just have to figure out which is your power pin. And I don't know if that's visible. I don't know if my camera will focus or not. But near the pins, there's actually.
Hang
I'm
on.
hearing that echo again.
Yeah, I'm working on it. You got it? You're okay?
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, yeah. Oh no, it's back.
It's back a little bit. Okay. All right. Fun of live streams, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, my brain doesn't function. I know a lot of people can just continue, but it's like it's my brain doesn't work that way.
Okay. I think you're sounding better. So go ahead.
All right, yeah, I think it's good now. Yeah, no, as I was saying, the actual GPS device itself has information next to the pins, like which one is the power, which one is the RX and the TX for transmissions. And you just plug it directly into the header, and you enable that serial connection that I showed you inside of the Raspberry Pi config. I'll go back there again. So inside of the interfacing options, you just enable the serial, and then it will automatically start coming in that GPS data. You don't need to do anything special. You will need to make use of it, but it pipes it in. I don't know if that made sense.
Well, let's see here. It says once the GPS is connected, how do you collect the data from the GPS? So that's he's
Yeah, so I don't have it plugged into this particular unit, but let me exit out of here.
okay.
Um, so inside the dev directory, there's a lot of stuff in there, but there's also a serial port. So it's TTY0. Let's see if what I generally do is you can say cat and it'll just print it out of the screen dev TTY. Yeah, so because I don't have the serial port enabled on this one, it would typically be that. So if I were to run this command in my terminal, it would just spit out raw GPS data. So latitude and longitude coordinates, the strength of the satellite, things like that. At which point you can develop Node applications. So Node does have access to the serial connection. There's packages like that. I think it's Node Serial, where you can just collect that information and parse it directly within your application.
Very nice. It's like a fire hose almost.
Yeah, yeah. I
Okay.
mean, you just feed it right into your Node application, decide what you want to do with it.
This is another cool project. And speaking of which, I wanted to just kind of like, because we are at 137 at this point,
Sure.
I wanted to just kind of segue into like cool projects, cool and interesting projects. So maybe
Yeah,
have you done anything of recent, or do you, I guess on top of that, you could answer both,
yeah.
but you could also tell us about, particular projects that you think are really cool that you've seen in the community.
Yeah. So I mean, as far as Raspberry Pi projects go, I know a lot of people do a lot of gaming stuff with it. Like they 3D print like Game Boy cases. If you're old like me, you know what a Game Boy is.
Mm-hmm.
They 3D print a case. They install some retro version of an emulator, and they turn their Raspberry Pis into in a small portable gaming device with a battery.
Right, like
I
the
always find those to be pretty interesting.
right,
A lot
like
of people do robotic stuff. I'm not personally interested in robotic stuff, so it doesn't really relate to me the same. But it really depends on what you're interested in.
so what have you like specifically like maybe the last,
Yeah.
month or so,
Yeah.
2 months?
So I'm gonna do a shameless plug here.
Okay.
Um, this is for the project that I'm actually going to bring with me to JavaScript LA in September. So I'm actually going to bring this Raspberry Pi Zero with the GPS unit. So the project that I was working on is I was just tracking my drives and things or my runs. And what I'm doing is I have it plugged into a battery or my car, and it's constantly collecting the GPS data and it's displaying it on a map in real time. So that way you can see kind of like how Uber is when you launch the Uber app, you see the cars moving around and things like that.
So you can
I was
oh,
doing that with the Raspberry Pi.
so you can see like a trail of like where all you've been essentially.
Yep, exactly.
Wow. Okay. That's pretty cool.
And I did that with Node.js.
Yeah, that's exciting. I can't wait for you to talk about it and show us, how you built the app. Do you think you can give us like a small preview today?
Small preview. Probably not right now, especially because I don't want to reveal my actual location. So I don't want people showing up at my house. But when I plan to do it when I come down to LA, I am going to be driving there, and I was gonna start it up like 10 minutes after I leave my location. So it'll be accurate as much as 10 minutes after I leave.
Okay. Well, I got you there. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Um, okay. Maybe I guess kind of finishing up. I know that we're near the 140 mark. And I don't want this to be too long because I want plenty of time for people to ask questions and we can like call it a day. Um, can you point us to some websites again, like maybe bring up your your browser or something and just help
yeah,
people kind of get started with like what they can do to like get started, as well as like what are some places they can go to like check out blogs,
yeah.
examples, and all that.
So the Raspberry Pi main site does have a ton of useful things. So their blog generally has technical tutorials on it as well as announcements. So these are just fun. Somewhere in here, I find it all the time. I always refer to their blog. But yeah, so white noise, night light kind of thing. There's all kinds of tutorials that you can learn about on their site. One other site that I go to. So even though that Amazon does sell a lot of Raspberry Pi products, a lot of the time it's heavily marked up. So
Sure.
there's actually a site I shop on. It's called Adafruit. So Adafruit.com. They sell just IoT stuff in general, not specifically to the Raspberry Pi, but they do have a very large catalog of Raspberry Pi stuff somewhere in here. I,
Those are some
I must
nice
not be
little
seeing it
devices
correctly.
there. I mean, like
Yeah.
I'm seeing some cool
Yeah.
stuff there.
Yeah, and they have their own set of tutorials as well. So there's definitely a lot of cool stuff that you can do.
Do you think like okay, so do you think the bar to entry to learning this stuff is kind of difficult? I mean, like if you're a
No,
newbie,
definitely not.
mm,
Yeah, so this, I mean, again, they heavily target probably ages 7+.
okay,
So
wow.
if 7-year-olds can figure it out, the barrier to entry is very low. Especially even if you need to purchase it. I mean, $35 for the Pi 4 is the same price. So it's not the most expensive thing in the world, and you can have a lot of fun with it.
And even learning the Linux, right? Like you can
Yeah,
basically just read a lot of the
exactly.
documentation, watch a lot of the videos on channels
Yep.
like YouTube and stuff.
Yep.
Very cool. I guess at this point, I wanted to just give you the opportunity to talk about yourself, like your blog, like um,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah, so I actually do have a lot of tutorials myself, even on the Raspberry Pi subjects. They're more in line with with the material that I am interested in, like servers, object storage, things that I'm doing around my house. So the blog is thepolyglotdeveloper.com. And it's not specific to Raspberry Pi. Anything that I find interesting, I usually write about it. Could be Node development, could be Go development, Raspberry Pi. I have a lot of video content as well to go with it, even Raspberry Pi video content. So it's if you're looking, if you have the same kind of interest that I do, it would work out well for you.
Very nice. Very nice. Okay. Uh, let's see here. One more question, I guess. It's from Pizaloka. He's saying, what resources do you recommend regarding learning more about the Pi when it comes to IoT projects and working with various sensors? Like
So
sensors, probably meaning like,
I missed some of your question because your audio keeps skipping.
oh,
Do you want to try again?
sure. Yeah. So let me know. Do you hear me okay?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay. So the question is, what resources do you recommend regarding learning more about the Pi when it comes to IoT projects with various sensors, like sensing
Yeah.
stuff?
Yeah, so the same sites that I went to. So Adafruit has a learning quarters. So Adafruit Learn, and you could find endless amounts of tutorials with sensors and things specific to the Raspberry Pi.
Is that
I think
Adafruit with
ADA
uh-huh
and then Fruit.
fruit.com. So okay.
Yeah,
Um, and then what was the one for the Raspberry Pi blog?
RaspberryPi.org.
Okay, so
There's also, I think, Hackster.io.
hackster.io.
Yeah, so yeah, there's projects on Hackster.io, Raspberry Pi. So there's all kinds of cool tutorials that you can do. I mean, some of them are silly and ridiculous, but it does get you familiar with just a different functionality, and then you can be inventive on your own after that.
Okay. Let's bring back Discord. All right. So, I think yeah. At this point, if there's any other questions, we can take them, or we can pretty much we can finish off this live stream for today.
And then do you have dates for the JavaScript LA VJ? So that way we can share them with the group. So that way if they're local to you, they can swing by.
Yes. So let's see here. I'm gonna pull up two tabs while that's going on. So I believe you're in September, right? Is that
Yep.
correct? Um, and I think we are working on getting all the promo finished. So let's see here. The best way to find out about our meetups is to always go to javascriptla.net. I'm going to pull that over to this screen here, and I'm going to move Discord down actually. Okay. Looks like some people here too might have asked questions. Oh, Marco says sounds good. Marco's our admin for
All right.
anybody checking it out. So yeah, usually we post our blogs, like we post our next meetups here, because we are having a couple meetups this month in August. We have not started promoting September just of yet, but yours, I believe, is remind me the date again. September.
16th and 17th, maybe somewhere around.
So yeah.
I'd I'd crack up my calendar, but that's going to be a horror if I'm sharing my screen. So nobody wants to see that.
Yeah, and same here. Like I'm starting to like move my screen around. Okay, yeah. So you're gonna be here on the let's see here. Um, I believe you're gonna be here on the 18th and the 19th. So that will be
Makes sense.
September 18th and the 19th. So we'll get a blog post up here. Obviously, if you want to follow us faster, you can check us out on Instagram or Discord. Those are the two places we update the most. So this is instagram.com/JavaScriptNinja. And I think we've already posted information about, like our upcoming meetups. So there's one with me on the 14th. That'll be on Angular. And so that'll be kind of exciting. And then after that, we'll have Nick, and that will be on the 18th of September again. And we'll put a link to our website here. And then, of course, if you want to chat with us, feel free to join our Discord server, JavaScript Ninja. So when you join, just you'll probably want a link to that. I'll put a link in the chat.
Sure.
It's just on the website here. I'm going to copy this. Let's see. So the invite link is right up here, or you can just click our website to get to that link. And Herman is asking about so Stephen and Herman. Okay, so I'll go through Herman's first because I started talking about Herman.
Sure.
Herman says, where would be the location? So we're going to do Woodland Hills, and then we're also going to do Orange County, Irvine. And that would be with Woodland Hills is always Farmers Insurance. Orange County is looking to be probably Zillow at this time. But that said, the place could change. And I think the 18th will have you in LA, and then the 19th will have you in Orange County.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and then let's see here. Dimitri, oh, actually I said Steven, but I think we got Steven. Okay, so yeah, Nick will be presenting in Woodland Hills too. Yes, correct. And then Dimitri asked, what are your thoughts on Arduino, Nick?
So I have an Arduino as well. It's cool. It's cheap. There's a lot of guides around there. My only beef with it is that you got to know C++. Whereas with the Raspberry Pi, you have the flexibility to use pretty much whatever language you want. So I'm even though I do a lot of Node.js development, I prefer to do Go development, and it works out quite well on the Raspberry Pi. And I don't have to burden myself with some crazy C++. Does that make sense?
I think Herman said excellent. So, yeah.
But I have them. They're cheap. They're just as cheap as the Raspberry Pi, and there's nothing wrong with them. You could do some pretty powerful things with them. It's just preference of language in my case.
So Go is actually better for the Arduino than Node.js for the Raspberry Pi, or does it not matter?
So I don't think you could do Go on the Arduino. I think it's only C++.
Oh, only C++. Okay, I got you.
It's kind of like a weird flavor of C++ too. It's like Arduino's own version of C++.
Right. I remember somebody saying Arduino is a little bit different.
Yeah.
You have to, it's the way the architecture is designed, right? That's why.
Yeah, I mean, nothing wrong with it. You don't, the thing about the Arduino is you don't have to burden yourself with becoming kind of a system admin. Like you don't have to familiarize yourself with Linux or anything like that. It's basically you write some code, you upload it to Arduino, it's done, it's running, it's there. Whereas the Raspberry Pi is a little more involved in that sense, but you have the flexibility of more programming technologies, or even, in my opinion, what you can do with it.
Very nice. Okay. Let's see. One more question here. He says, "What is?" I guess he says, "What about in terms of performance?" Um, I think maybe he's asking more specifically, like, how does the performance of a
Yeah.
Raspberry Pi compare to something else?
So I don't have all of those details. So my Arduino is the Nano. So it's like a $10 one. It's probably more comparable to my Raspberry Pi Zero. You can definitely get more expensive, more powerful Arduinos, just like you can get more expensive and powerful Raspberry Pi. Uh, I guess it really depends. I don't have a firm answer for that one because there's other boards too that are still IoT that are beyond the scope of that. Like Intel has the Intel Edison boards, Qualcomm has their Dragon boards. There's a lot of different options out there when it comes to figuring out what you need.
I have a question for you, and you just made me think of it. How long do the Raspberry Pis last, right? Like, let's say you buy it
Yeah.
this year, will it last till like next year, or will it break?
Yeah, why not? I have the first generation Raspberry Pi from like 3 or 4 years ago, and it's still fine.
It's still
I
working.
mean, your SD card might burn out by then because it's got a removable SD card, and you never know the lifespan of those things. But as far as the hardware goes, as long as you don't like send it in the washing machine or something, I think it'd probably be working forever, or you don't get any kind of surge of power that blows up your USB port, right?
That's right. Um, okay, well, that's cool. I'm gonna bring my camera back so we can see me. Um, so Nick, thank you so much today for doing this live stream. This was fun. Like I said, we were worried about like the technical difficulties, but hey, we made it, and I think we did a pretty good job for our first run here. So,
Yeah.
um, if you guys are excited by this particular live stream and this was fun, let us know if you'd like us to do this again. We can probably do different speakers each month. We could also work on maybe doing some tutorials as well, like where it's just code together, maybe do like some coding challenges.
Yeah,
Um,
didn't you agree to installing like live share on Visual Studio Code and hacking on code together?
yeah, so I want to eventually get to that. I don't want to do that while we are doing our first live stream,
Yeah, definitely not.
worrying about so many different issues. But that said, I am more up for like, doing like little code alongs, maybe in the night. Nick, you're also a Twitch person, so you tend to do a lot of tutorials. Are there any tutorials upcoming that you want our audience
Yeah,
to check out?
I'm on Twitch every Wednesday. So if you want to catch me on Twitch,
Okay.
uh,
And what's
just
your
find.
URL there?
So it's twitch.tv/heredev. HERE. I'll load it up in my browser just so that way we're on the same page.
H. Okay. Here, dev.
Yeah.
And your website was the Polyglot developer, right?
Yeah, it's definitely include the in there.
Okay. Polyglotdeveloper.com. Okay. All right. Okay. So, yeah, thank you guys for joining us today. Again, this was a lot of fun. We'll see you in September, Nick, and we'll see the audience too next week or the week after. I think it's August 14th, actually. So 2 weeks from now. And if we do some more live streams, we'll definitely announce it on Instagram and Twitter.
Sure.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for coming, Nick. I'll talk to you later.